Lawyers of Reddit, what are some of the most hilarious, absurd, ridiculous things you've seen in someone's will? Had a guy be extremely charitable when we were drafting his will. $1 million to his church. $2 million to local hospital. Another $2 million to the American Heart Association. When we gave him a quote on how much it cost to draft the will, it wasn't much because it was a rather straightforward document. He asked for a payment plan. He couldn't afford the will. Dude had no money. He thought you could just leave money to people, organizations, and the government would foot the bill. He was also the sort that became visibly angry talking about welfare and government handouts. Which made his thinking even funnier to me. My professor just said that he had someone in the early 80s that left his 3 sons and grandsons his extensive baseball card collection. It seemed normal when my professor first heard of it, but then he was handed a handwritten chart that had several hundred cards listed with the name of the recipient and why that person was getting the card. I leave this picture to Bobby because Bobby can't throw worth a damn. Did a few pro bono wills up on the reservation. This big guy asks me to give everything back to the tribe because he has no living immediate family. No problem. Then he has one exception. His Vietnam era motorcycle. Said it was the first thing he bought after getting home. Wants to be buried with it. I should clarify. Not with it. Literally on it and in riding position. I helped him set aside the funds necessary to do it and have a lot prepaid for. Dude was awesome. A client had 2 sons. He left a whole bunch of specific distributions to one of the sons, his truck, gum collection, etc. To the other son he specifically left one thing, a poster of himself in high school. No idea if there was some significant sentimental value behind the poster or if it was more of a look at what I'm giving your brother, and here's a poster of me so you will never forget that I loved you less. NALB, but read about a New York heiress who died in her 90s and named her 2 grandchildren in her will. Meaning they showed up for the reading. Actually, what was written in her will wasn't to my grandchildren X and Y. I leave nothing. For reasons that are known to them. For reasons that are known to them. Ice. Cold. Not a lawyer. But my so's father was, and he always said his favorite story was of this old money lady he knew of. She was worth around 15 mother-in-law and had 5 kids. One of whom married a horrible man. Who would spout just the foulest ducking sheet against anyone that wasn't a white, rich, able-bodied, Christian male. When she died, each child got $3 million. Except for the pussybaby's wife. She donated that money to things like HBCUs, Planned Parenthood, the Special Olympics, her local synagogue, food banks, etc. Because you both deserve to die penniless and hating each other for being awful human beings. Filthy rich man was the owner of 2 pet ferrets at the time of his death. He ducking loved these ferrets. And wanted to ensure that these ferrets were taken care of when he passed. So informed his sons that the ferrets were to receive all of his property. My mom only works for crazy rich people. The worst will she ever told me about was this old guy who was close to 90. He wanted it so that when he dies, all of his millions will go into a trust for his kids and his kids will never be able to touch it. But they can collect the interest it generates. So he had my mom set him up with this group of accountants who will manage the trust. And he specifically arranged a plan with them to manage the account in such a way that their yearly billing will almost exactly match the interest to be made. So when he dies, his kids will inherit millions but will only be able to spend like $35 a year from it. $35 that the kids have to split between them. 54-year-old. Very wealthy. No children. Not married. Left his 6-month-old, at the time of drafting, nephew a 1980 Lamborghini Countach LP 4000S. Had no idea. Had to Google it. It is expensive. Poor kid. That's going to be expensive to maintain. Not a lawyer, but my mom had her will updated to say that if me or my brother announce her death on Facebook, then we are out of it. It sounds kind of harsh, but me and my brother think it is hilarious. She did it because she doesn't give a shit about Facebook, but all her friends do and they keep pestering her to get one, and she thinks it's tacky to announce her death on there. So, your plan is to try and always have your brother's Facebook login credentials on hand. So if mum dies, you log into his, post from his account, and then you happily take the whole cake and not just half. Obligatory, not a lawyer, but I can answer this one. My grandpa left $1 to my piece of sheet thief of a dad with the instructions to shove up his ass. I haven't personally seen the will, so I don't know if this is true or not, but he was a WWII vet and total badass. So I believe it 100%. We once had a guy who wanted to leave all of his money to two actresses from his favorite TV show. My dad teases my brother and I that his will has a stipulation that he be cremated and his ashes baked into a loaf of bread, and that my brother and I have to eat said loaf of bread to qualify for any inheritance. The scary thing is my dad is a lawyer who writes wills. My mom is in probate law. A older woman had many requests, including changing the people in her will several times a month, adding and subtracting certain family members she had a falling out with. However, her funniest request was that the entire family be called to the law firm and the will be read aloud like on TV. I can only imagine her watching her afterlife like a soap opera. Edit, that's a lot more upvotes than I'm used to. I'll reply to everyone soon. I have 2 younger siblings, but my parents haven't altered their will in a long time. So it reads, all assets shall be divided up between Nick Tesla, Nicole Tesla, and any other children we may have. So we poke fun at my youngest sister for just being any other children we may have. Also, I'm the only son of an only son of an only son of an only son. So my grandfather put in his will that I was to get $1,000 for every child that bore my last name, legitimate or not. I was 6 at the time. Not a lawyer, but my dad was sick and he knew he wouldn't be around for much longer and he wanted his will to be done. He was a super practical joker and always told us that when he died he wanted to be cremated and his ashes put in the pepper pots at Wimpy. So the lawyer is taking the notes and asks what he wanted done when he passed away. I froze and looked at him and he had the biggest smile ever and just said he'd like to be cremated. I was so relieved. We both had such a good laugh about it afterwards and he said he'd never have made me do it. Gosh, I miss him so much, : Edit. Oh wow. Gold. Thank you, kind stranger. What a great start to the day. XXX. My grandpa originally had just 2 grandkids. My brother, 17, and I, 22. He has a collection of nice cars. Originally, I was getting his 2 Corvettes and my brother was getting his Cadillac and a race car. Well, my aunt and uncle finally coughed up some kids. And my mom is about to have another baby. So now there's 8 grandkids. He's announced that he will be having a contest for the cars. The contest is to make him an apple pie that tastes just like his mother's. Not a lawyer, but a law clerk. I draft the wills. My personal favorite bequest was elephants go to the grandchildren. Largest to smallest. Do the largest elephants go to the largest grandchildren? Also, are these real elephants or elephant statues or something? I'm still not really sure what they meant by that. I am indeed a lawyer. And this happened this week. Client wanted to cremate her alive and healthy animals when she passed away. Conditional inheritances, if you marry by age X, etc. Also disowning people if they don't follow the grantor's desired lifestyle choices. People would rather give their money away than give it to their gay son or daughter. My, since passed, aunt and uncle wrote up a will right before my uncle died. I was about 3 at the time and maybe meet my uncle a handful of times. Fast forward 15 years. My aunt passes with the same will. And half my family goes to settles all the affairs. Weeks later I overhear my mom on the phone talking about the will. It was set up that I get 50% of all assets, plus the house and any cars, while everyone else, 8 or 9 people, get the other 50%. But I also received controlling factor, giving me the right to settle any arguments between everyone else. I was about 3 when this will was written. But my uncle said that there was something special about me and deemed I should get 50%. Sadly there was nothing left because it was used on my aunt's end of life care. To me it wasn't the money, I could really care less. Just the fact that I barely knew my uncle but he liked me so much he wrote me in like that. And that my aunt agreed with him and didn't touch his will. This guy's will wasn't notable, but his medical power of attorney gives someone the power to make medical decisions on your behalf if you are unable, got pretty interesting. He wanted to instruct his agent to arrange a Les Six show for his viewing pleasure on his deathbed. I told him it probably wouldn't be enforceable and instead wrote a provision requesting, but not requiring, that the agent arrange for strippers to perform for him. But no sex or other physical contact. He eventually changed his mind about the whole thing. He had just divorced his wife and I think he merely wanted to piss her off, knowing that she would probably see it. A man who wanted his cremated remains to be sprinkled on the crotches of well-endowed teenage boys. I have assumed it was some kind of joke. I mean, how would his heirs even make that happen? He had died and I was just determining the ownership of his former real estate. So I didn't ask. I am not a lawyer. But when I was in college someone died and left money to the college and in the will it said, I don't care what you do with the money. Throw the kids an ice cream party or something, and that is exactly what the money was used for. They threw a gigantic ice cream party. NALB but was the executor of a family member's estate. The most satisfying part was the hateful will of the deceased who was initially in the will. But she had gotten the deceased to drastically increase her amount by cutting out my immediate family members while he was in the hospital before a major surgery. Once he recovered from surgery, he redrafted and wrote her out. Not a lawyer and it wasn't a will. It was actually a TV show but I don't really remember it that well. I shouldn't have commented. Man, have I seen some bad ones recently. Had this little old lady come in. A referral from one of our clients who was an accountant. He said she was a little bit strange but nothing too odd. Lady had 4 children. Her husband had passed. Had a couple of $100,000 in various bank accounts plus a house. So she appoints her friend as executor and trustee, with the direction to sell her house when she dies. A sizable portion of her estate was to go to some weird church. The balance of her estate is to be invested and used to house her 3 little dogs or any dogs that she has at her death, with the direction that her trustee look after the dogs. Those dogs are going to be much more wealthy than myself in a couple of years. I remember a case from law school that was used to teach the concept of the holographic will, wherein a dude was run over by his own tractor and pinned to the ground. He was able to scratch his will into the paint on the tractor's fender and it held up in court. My uncle left instructions for the burial plot next to his to be kept and maintained for the eventual burial of his widow, my aunt. I always thought that was incredibly presumptuous of him. He was older and she was still an attractive middle-aged woman when he died. She got married 2 more times. In fact, both of those husbands died too. HMM. Not a lawyer, but a co-worker of mine has it in his will that before he is cremated, he is to be wrapped in bacon. He has no family and a lot of money and this dude loves bacon. He said it's gonna cost somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500 to be cremated in bacon. But totally worth it to him. My husband joked that if I die before him, he's going to have me cremated and my ashes turned into a gem. I'm going to put it in my will so he has to have it done. I told him that I should put in my will that if he were to ever remarry, then my gem has to be a part of his new wife's engagement or wedding ring. And if they divorce, then I go back to him. I will never let him get rid of me, lol. Obligatory, not a lawyer. But I know the guy who did this. My dad's his accountant and I keep having to meet him for some reason. His dad left him the family business which wasn't worth masses, but it was still a nice amount. The will stated that if he sold it, 1/3 of its value had to go to each of his 2 sisters. Well, the business started booming after a little while, and the business was then worth millions. The guy sold the business and gave his sisters a third of what it was worth. He hired some lawyers to deal with his sisters when they tried to get a third of its current value. But because of the wording in the will, he won. The guy then just invested and owns ridiculous amounts of land. He's bought whole fields just so he has somewhere away from people to have a picnic with his significantly younger wife. Not a lawyer, but my father-in-law was assigned to be executor of a will from a rich aunt. She left, per her will, 95% of her stuff, which was quite a lot, to a Children with Cancer Foundation. Noble cause, but there was no foundation with that name. Now he had to find a worthy cause that would basically fulfill the deceased aunt's will, which was a effing nightmare.